Well, this is the Dean Abbott podcast, and today I'm talking with Jeff Putnam. Jeff is a writer, author, and Catholic convert who has been documenting his story online for quite some time. Jeff, how you doing?
I'm good, brother. Thanks for having me on.
Sure. So you're not Catholic by any chance, are you?
I mean, this is one of like maybe 30 rosaries in the house. So yeah, I would say I would say so.
Well, tell us a little bit about that happened. I don't think you've always been Catholic, have you? Where did this start for you?
No, I grew up in the Southern Baptist persuasion of Christianity.
Hmm.
Uh, that lasted until I was about 12.
Mm.
Um, I don't know. The whole thing is kind of weird to me because I was just told, this is what you're supposed to do. This is what you're supposed to believe. And I'm 12, right?
Hmm.
Like
Right.
I'm reading Hardy Boys. I'm reading Goosebumps. I'm trying to figure out when I'm going to get armpit hair like the other guys in gym class because, want to be a man.
But were your family like serious churchgoers? This wasn't just like a nominal thing you did on Sundays and didn't, but it was a big part of your family?
I want to say yes, but I also want to say no. I mean, this is me not trying to take a dig at Baptists, but the Baptist church that I grew up in was one of those where you're there Sunday morning, you're there Sunday night, you're at Sunday school before church on Sunday mornings. Uh, and then on Wednesday nights, you're there for RAs, which I can't even remember what that was like an abbreviation for. It was like a teenage thing, right?
Yeah, like a youth group.
Like a youth group. Yeah, like a youth group kind of thing. But there was like stages. You had like the RAs for the little kids, and then it was like the youth group across the hall.
Right.
But everything else was, not really mentioned. Oh, it's Sunday, we're going to church. It's Wednesday, we're going to church. But I don't think, and you would see any sign that we were a church going family uh, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday.
Huh.
You know?
Uh-huh.
But it was, you have to go. You're not missing church. You're going because I said so, kind of thing.
Hmm. And where did you grow up? Where part of the country was this?
South Carolina, right
Oh,
there in the stream of the Bible Belt.
right. And so there's a lot of cultural expectation around church or whatever.
Oh yeah, big time. I think the only things that are bigger than the Southern Baptist Convention in this area are the Clemson USC football game rivalry,
Right.
and that's just a religion of its own down here.
Sure. And so you grew up Southern Baptist going to church and somewhat somewhat cultural more than necessarily a inherent part of your family's life or structure.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I can't say that it was that none of my family were to say devout, other than regular attendance and whatever the preacher said was
Mm.
solid gold kind of thing.
Hmm.
The preacher comes to the house once every couple of weeks, and he's having coffee with the folks kind of thing. And
Right.
I'm just you know kids, get out of the room, the grown-ups are trying to talk
Hmm.
kind of
Hmm.
thing.
Right. Right.
It's like, yeah, I think it was really more cultural than anything else, which is why I was adopted when I was 12. My dad died in 92. My mom remarried. Me and stepdad didn't get along. He was one of those that he liked to teach with his knuckles.
Hold on just a second. So
Uh,
hang on. So up until so you were Southern Baptist until about 12, and then
mhm.
your father died.
No, my father died when I was like 5, just turned 6, some one of those.
Oh, I see. Okay. But you were
And my
adopted.
mom remarried,
Mm,
and
I see.
the way I was, the adoption thing's kind of messed up. But I was 12 years old, got tired of my stepdad putting his hands on me. So I put hands back.
Mm.
And then suddenly it was just too much. And my mom gave her parental rights to her brother who raised me from then on.
Oh, okay. So your uncle.
Yeah. Yeah. So I
Okay.
just moved like a county over. Well, the county line was, I don't know, 100 feet down the road.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
I ended up going to a different school. Yeah, that kind of thing.
Right.
But then, they weren't church going people, and it was, if you want to go, I'll take you. If you don't. And I think maybe there was a year or two where I was still going to like the youth group thing because that's
Uh-huh.
where, friends I had made went.
Right.
But after that, it was pretty much nothing. All from the time I met my wife when I was 18.
Hmm.
Uh, she was born and raised Catholic.
Hmm.
Like she was baptized as an infant.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, but I was never really anything, never been an atheist, never been a non-believer, right? It
Hmm.
was just kind of like, I got stuff to do. I was in the military when I met my wife, and I think I went to some Sunday services a couple of times in basic training just to get out of the barracks, you
Right.
know, but it was never like a big part of my life. And then fast forward 20 years, 19 years. Yeah. Fast forward about 19 years. Um, I was on the total opposite end of the spectrum uh, with, religion. I was a practicing pagan,
What does that mean for you?
and I was involved in Norse paganism, multiple gods,
Hmm.
and my view was, maybe all the gods are real. Maybe no one's wrong. It was, for lack of a better word, it was spiritual, religious relativism, right?
What what made that appealing at the time?
I think it was something that I could choose rather than something I was told. You know what I
Mm.
mean?
Hmm. Hmm.
So a little after that, about a year and a half after that, a friend, you and I both know him, Jerry Adams,
Uh-huh.
had contacted me because, I'd been writing professionally for a couple of years at that point. And he asked me to help him write a book, and I'd already written two, had them on Amazon, ghost written for other authors that are out there. And his book, Men of Grit, which right over here,
Huh?
on top of my record player there, um, is based off of his life growing up, how his father set an example for him, and what it meant to be a good man. And
Hmm.
he was tying in his own journey in being a Christian man and what
Hmm.
it meant to pair a strong man with a Christian man.
Hmm.
Because, I mean, we can face it, a lot of modern day Christians are just soft,
Hmm.
right? They conflate meekness and weakness.
Hmm.
And so we were writing that book. It took about 18 months to get to completion. And it involved a lot of research into scripture,
Hmm.
a lot of research into like church history and things like that.
Hmm.
And Jerry was never like, hey, you know, you ever thought about converting or anything like that?
Right.
He was just, we were having 1 to 2 hour long conversations twice a week at 5:30
Hmm.
in the morning,
Wow. Right.
working on this book over Zoom. And it was like an 18-month slow burn, but somewhere along the lines, I started feeling called. Right. I
Was
mean,
there a point when you during those conversations when you started to realize that something was happening?
maybe. I mean, I started thinking more about what I was reading
Mm.
and what I was researching and what I was writing.
Hmm.
And I guess right around when that was happening, something else was happening. Like I felt like I was being pulled toward God.
Mm.
Right.
Hmm.
And we finished the book spring of 2023. A few months later, I had been having several conversations with Jerry, other conversations with another mutual friend of ours, Adam Lane Smith, who's very devout Catholic, and now he is godparent. Him and his wife are godparents to my youngest two children. All right, I'm kind of curious about being Catholic, and he's like, I've been waiting 5 years for this, buddy.
Yes. Right.
And so
do you know why it didn't occur to you just to go back to being Southern Baptist?
My experiences with the Baptist church, still very fresh in my mind. And a lot of it went into some of the viewpoints that we put in Jerry's book, such as the effeminate, soft-handed, constantly crying, overweight pastor in the pulpit blubbering about how his love affair with Jesus changed his life, and then the weird Jesus is my boyfriend type praise music that they wanted to do, and the guitar solo concert crap. It
wasn't for you, right?
No, it's like the Shudder factor for me, right? Because to me, it was more about them performing than anything as far as reverence to God. Right. Now, again, that may not be the case for every Protestant out there. I don't want people listening to this and thinking, oh, he's so totally digging on Protestants. I'm digging on my experiences with Protestants. Whether that's relevant to yours or not, it is what it is.
But there are many Protestants who, even if they belong to a Protestant group, acknowledge that sort of the
cringeness.
Well, yeah, and that the patterns of kind of mainstream evangelical, I guess, services are problematic, to say the least, right? In all the ways that you've described. I mean, the harshest critics I've ever heard of praise music have been evangelical Protestants.
That's fair.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So that was why you didn't want to go back to being Southern Baptist.
Well, that, and, talking with Adam, he started helping me with some resources going through the entirety of church history, tracing it all the way back to the founding of the Catholic Church by Jesus Christ. Right? The apostolic succession from Peter all the way down 266 popes later to Pope Francis. And it's an unbroken line of apostolic succession. And I'm like, okay. And then the more I started reading into the actual history of the church, I was like, there's no way this isn't true.
Give me an example of what you discovered.
So I had these preconceived notions, such as like Catholicism didn't start until Constantine, right? 300 odd years after the resurrection of Christ. And then I'm like, oh, wait, what does the word Catholic come from? It comes from Catholicos, which is Greek, meaning church. And it replaced what they called in the Bible people of the way. Right? But Catholicos meant church, as in there's the church. And between all of the tradition that was passed down through either oral transmission or written transmission from the church fathers prior to the Bible ever even being compiled, all of those things were still in practice to this day. And I know the big old thing, well, if it's not in the Bible, it's not true. Well, you can't tell me that for 340 years prior to the Bible being agreed upon by the fathers of the Catholic Church, by the way, nobody was doing anything right. What they were already doing is what they wrote down, right? And even in the Bible, well, I think it's Thessalonians 2:15, it's talking about adhere to the writings and the traditions that have been taught to you. And again, going all the way through reading the catechism of the church, reading church history, studying the church fathers. I was like, there's no way this isn't true. And I've just been an idiot for the past, 30 odd years. And, my wife was already Catholic.
Had she maintained her Catholic faith throughout your marriage? Had she been attending church faithfully and all of that through the years?
No.
Was she? No.
No.
Okay, good.
She never like, well, I'm not Catholic anymore. She just wasn't a practicing Catholic.
Right. So your change represented a change for her as well in some way.
Well, I'm the one that said, this Sunday, everyone's going to church. And she's like, okay. she didn't say why, she said, okay. Because, I talked about it. I was like, working on this book with Jerry, talking with Adam. I'm thinking about going to church. And she goes, oh, okay. Kept sipping her coffee. Right. Mm-hmm. So I got online. I'm Googling, I'm talking to Catholic friends, and a lot of my friends are Catholic, and they were always talking about the traditional Latin Mass. And if you want to find a good church, find one that still does the traditional Latin Mass. So I'm like, okay. So I take to the Google machine and I'm looking up, and there's only 480 at the time, 485 Catholic churches in the U.S. that still do the traditional Latin Mass. And one of them just happened to be 40 minutes from my house.
Wow.
Now there's fewer than that now. There's like 481, but I was like, okay, cool. We'll go to that one. And the following Sunday, loaded everybody up into the car, went to the 10 a.m. Mass. And now I walked in there, very cautious. Like, all right, we're going to find a pew. We're going to sit down. I have no idea what I'm doing. My wife hasn't been in, rusty. And I'm, the Mass is going on, and Father Smith, who is the parish priest, goes up to give the homily during Mass. And I've got 1 foot out the door. I'm like, okay, because I've heard the horror stories about some of the progressive churches that are, let's have, ordained women, let's bless same-sex marriages and all this other stuff. And I'm like, if this is a woke church, I'm not going to be disrespectful, but I am going to discreetly escort my family out the door, and we'll go try a different church.
Sure.
Right. So I'm sitting there, and he, as if on cue, he starts talking about how people have asked him if our parish, at the time it was their parish, was ever going to have female altar servers, or female deacons and things like that. And his response was the most based response I've ever heard from a priest. He goes, to put it in terms that everyone can understand, LOL, no. And I was like, oh, okay. Let's see what he's got to say now. And he went through and he explained, yeah, you had these deaconesses back in the, in biblical times, but their jobs as deaconesses were to guide women and women only to the faith. Christ himself was called to serve. Well, women are not supposed to be serving men in the church. They're there for God. They're there for Christ. So a priest is, as an ordained priest, is little Christ. He's acting in the place of Christ, as in leading the church. He's serving. And contrary to the misogynistic beliefs of a lot of people, we're not about that in, the Catholic Church. These women are not going to be serving. The men, the priests, the deacons are serving the flock, right? Because that's why you're not going to have female altar servers at this parish. Because I can't speak for what other parishes do, but here we're not going to do it. And I was like,
and an altar server, what does an altar server do?
Well, it's, you've seen the altar boys. They wear the vestments, and, they're carrying the incense or helping the priest prepare the Eucharist. carrying the crucifix, walking in the procession with the crucifix, the torches, the thurible, which is your big incense on a chain, um, holding the book of prayers for the priest as he recites them, that kind of thing. So it would still be a woman serving a man up there on the altar.
Right.
But I thought, okay, this is the most based priest that I've ever encountered in person, which I've only encountered 2 at that point, so it wasn't much of a standard. But I'm coming back next week. And as we were walking out after the mass had ended, I introduced myself, my wife, and my kids all to Father Smith. And he's like, oh, welcome. Hope you come back. Oh, we will. That was May 7th or May 8th of 2023.
Mm-hmm.
Haven't missed a single mass since.
Mm-hmm. So, and how was the process of becoming Catholic? Did you go through, I think it's called RCIA?
Mm-hmm. The Rite of Christian Initiation for Adults.
And what was that like?
It was basically going through this book over here. The Catechism of the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
And as you can see,
It's
not a short read. It's
right.
not a short read.
Right.
And most people think that, the Catholics come in and they're like, okay, this is how you are going to do and da 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 da. No. This is what the church believes. This is what the church does. If you believe it, you're welcome to join us. If you don't, you're welcome to just sit here in class and listen or leave or, whatever. You could even come to mass. We're not going to kick you out.
Sure.
But there's zero pressure to like, this is why you do, or you're going to go to hell with the fire and brimstone of a lot of the Southern Baptists that, I grew up listening to.
Mm-hmm.
But it lasted from August 23rd until a week before Easter, because we didn't have the final class was the week before Holy Week began.
Mm-hmm.
And so my wife, she was baptized as a child, but she never received First Communion. She was never confirmed. So she and my 15-year-old son all went through RCIA with me. And at the end of RCIA, or throughout that whole time, my kids, my younger ones, were in catechism classes before, Mass. And so at the Easter Vigil, my daughter was baptized and received First Communion. My youngest son was baptized. He'll receive First Communion next year. My 15-year-old was baptized, confirmed, and received First Holy Communion. He's now an altar server. I myself, still not baptized, still not confirmed, still haven't received Holy Communion. Reason being is because my parish does everything by the books, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so my wife, she was baptized Catholic. Now, we were married outside the church.
Mm.
So what we need to do, and we're in the process of doing it now, our marriage gets convalidated by the church and blessed by the church so that we're officially married by the Catholic Church.
So as of right now, you haven't been baptized or received First Communion as of right this minute?
As of right this minute.
Oh, okay. So, okay. Right.
But
so
it will be in like a couple of weeks. So what it is, again, I'm technically no faith, and Melissa is baptized Catholic, my wife. And so the church has to approve of the convalidation of marriage between a Catholic and a non-Catholic, right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So basically, it's just we spoke with our deacon, we filled out the prenuptial paperwork, and we sent that off to the diocese. They sign it, send it back. Okay, cool, because it's notated on there that I'm converting to Catholicism and all this other. And then we just have to schedule it with our priest.
And why do you have to do all this?
Because marriage is a sacrament, and we were married outside of the Catholic Church. So we have not received the sacrament of marriage.
Mm.
And once that's done, at the convalidation ceremony, I will be baptized, confirmed, and receive First Holy Communion. My wife will be confirmed, and receive her first Holy Communion at the exact same ceremony where our marriage is being convalidated, which is pretty much like a micro Catholic wedding,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so when I was, getting my priest to explain all this to me, why it had to be that way, it's like, because we want you entering the church together as one. So my wife and I will be one, as is defined in marriage in the Catholic Church, at the time we enter the church together as one.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a bit of a, paperwork headache. And, the joke is there's no better record keepers out there than the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
They've kept a lot of records for a long time. And so it's, getting my wife's baptism records and then us filling out, yes, it's basically all of the wedding vows, but it's in written form that we send off to the diocese. Because if you want to get married in the Catholic Church, you still have to do like a pre-Cana, the wedding at Cana, which is basically you're sitting down with a deacon or a priest, and they're talking to you and explaining to you the importance of marriage and that marriage is a sacrament and it's going to be taken very seriously. And outside of death, there's nothing that is going to legitimize a separation between the man and his wife, right? And so, again, very strict, very old school, by the book, hardcore Catholic. And I'm like, I kind of wouldn't have it any other way because I don't like the wishy-washiness of a lot of some of the things I've heard. Well, it's like, well, Pastor Jim Bob told me that it's okay if me and my fiance are sleeping together because technically we're common law married. I'm like, no, it's got to be
right.
Sure. Well, no technicalities. It's got to be. It's either right or it's not.
I mean, part of the reason that people are drawn to Catholicism is for clarity.
Yeah, I mean, again, I talked about this earlier on my my YouTube show with my co-host Ed. It's hard to argue with like 5 Protestants at once because all 5 of the Protestants all have a different belief of what's true and what's not true. Like a Lutheran probably won't believe what a Presbyterian does or a Baptist or whatever. When it comes to Catholicism, that's it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you are on your way in a couple of weeks to receiving First Communion, et cetera.
Yeah, full blown Catholic. But I'm on the I'm in the Adoration Guild ministry at my church. I've helped co-found a men's group, add mass every single Sunday plus some, every single week.
What difference has it made?
I wish I had a time machine so I could go back and convert sooner. I've never felt this kind of peace. I've never felt this kind of absolute surety that I'm in the right place ever. And the way that filters out into every aspect of my life, it's kind of like if you come to a 4-way stop, you're paralyzed by having so many choices. But with the church, I'm not paralyzed. There's a path that is laid out before me, and I just have to follow it.
You don't have to. Not everyone has to reinvent the wheel for himself.
Right. There's freedom of movement in that when you're not paralyzed by indecision or uncertainty. Think of it this way. And I think G.K. Chesterton put it this way. I want to say it was in Orthodoxy. If you have a playground that is right next to a cliff, the kids will never go out there and play on that playground. They'll stay as far back as they can because they're afraid of that cliff. Well, if you think of the Catholic Church as a fence right along the edge of that cliff. The kids will run out there all day, play on that playground, and they'll even press their little faces up to the fence to look over the cliff and take in the beauty, right? And the fence, in most cases, is thinking of as a barrier, right?
Mm-hmm.
When really it's safety. Because, and that's what the church has been for me. It's safety. I'm not stuck, worried, because now I know. I'm not worried about what might, because I know what is.
Mm-hmm.
That fence is there, and I'm not pulled back from life in the way that I was before.
How were you pulled back from life? You never struck me as a person pulled back from life, and I've known you for a while.
In everything I've ever done, there's always been this notion in the back of my head, whether it was, power lift training and getting jacked like Aquaman, or fighting in the Golden Gloves, or starting a business or starting another business and running this and running that. There's always been this air of fear and uncertainty, as even what's the point?
Mm.
I'm doing it because I want this. Those things were all true, but I don't think I really saw a big point in anything I was doing. I was doing it probably to find a point.
And now you see a
Right?
point.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the point?
God has something in store for each and every one of us. He sent his son down here to teach us, to die for us, to save us, and to not accept such a gift. It's like closing a book before you get to the end. It's like you read it halfway through and you close it and you're like, meh.
Except that book is your life.
Pretty much.
So, can you think of any practical ways that that this new level of clarity and surety has actually changed what you do on a daily basis?
I spend more time in prayer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously, how do you fall in love with a woman? You didn't meet her and be like, I love her to pieces, I'm going to marry her. No, you spent time with her.
Mm-hmm.
You got to know her. She got to know you. It's the same thing with God. You can't just wake up one morning and be like, I love God.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really know God. You haven't spent time with God. You haven't, spent time in prayer, talking to God, and hearing him when he answers back.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean that in a metaphorical as much as I do a literal sense. Like, I think anybody that's ever spent a lot of time in prayer understands what I mean when I say that.
Mm-hmm.
You can feel that you're being guided, you're being answered, you're being listened to.
Mm-hmm. And one way, tell me more about what that experience is like for you when you feel like God is answering you back.
So I go to the Adoration Chapel
Mm-hmm.
once a week, and I spend an hour in there with my wife. And when you're sitting there in the chapel, total silence, just you and God, the body of Christ is right there in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
And you can unload everything as if he's sitting right beside you, listening to you. It's hard to put into words, but I feel like I am in direct audience of Christ himself,
Mm-hmm.
and he's listening to me. And there's this overwhelming sense of reassurance that kind of washes over me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like, to put it, look, there's no way to describe it in words that doesn't mitigate the impact and meaning of what I'm saying. But you're having a bad day, and somebody comes up and they put their arm around you, and you feel that right there, and you're like, I got you, bro. Imagine that times 1,000.
Mm-hmm. I
Like
had
that
lunch.
feeling.
I had lunch with a friend today. We talked about many things, but he gave me this advice, which basically amounted to saying, "How much ever time you are, how much ever you are praying now, pray more." And I often have the same experience that you are trying to describe, and
Yeah.
I
Like you
wonder if
get it. It's just hard to
right,
articulate because there's
right.
no words on this earth that can describe it.
But I wonder if it's like this for you. It's often for me, maybe what you're saying about the hug, but it is, I often have a deep sense that I'm being told to chill out, and that I am that this is actually all going somewhere, and that I suppose when I say chill out, the more biblical way to say it is to fear not, right?
Well, I was going to say, do not be afraid is said more times in scripture than anything else.
Hmm. And but often I often pray about simply what, the next step. And one of the one of the surprising things to me about having this sense that God is answering me in some way is often the sort of mundane level of answer that I get. So, it is just go to the next meeting, go take a nap. Yeah, like it's almost like a reassurance at that sort of mundane level that I'm on the right path, and that and it's like a reassurance to do the next right thing in a way.
Yeah. You know what I've found that my life, and it's hard to describe, again, my life has improved in ways, and these are subtle ways, right? Whether it's the general energy that uh, is in the house, right? Everybody's a little nicer to each other, especially when you
Right.
got siblings close in age with kids and they're constantly fighting or whatever. But more than that, it's there's just like a deeper sense of peace over my home. We were already a peaceful home, mind you,
Mm, mm,
but it's deeper,
mm,
right? And I've found that I pray for other people a lot more than I pray for myself.
mm,
I'm praying for my wife. I'm praying for my children. I'm praying for my friends. I'm praying for people that I've never met. I'm praying to end abortion. I'm praying for the repose and the repentance of the souls of, those that are not a part of the church yet,
mhm.
right? I'm praying for my my friends' endeavors in their businesses. I'm praying for my priest. I'm praying for the Pope. And when I walk out of that adoration chapel, I might not have asked God, please help me with this, or I just need to get this off my chest. I've just spent the entire time praying for other people. And I walk out of there feeling amazing.
Mhm. Mhm. Now, you've talked quite a bit about your conversion online. You haven't encountered any objections to Catholicism by writing about it on Twitter or your blog or anything, have you?
Oh, 1,001. but it's par
Really?
for the course. I mean, anti-Catholicism is as American as apple pie.
What have some of the objections been? First of all, are most of the
Oh,
objections from other Christians, or are they from atheists or something like that?
most of them are from other Christians.
Mhm. And what are the chief objections?
Uh, we're worshiping Mary. We're not.
Hmm.
Um, I think that's like the major one. You know, Mary was not uh, was not ever virgin. She was not assumed into heaven. She's not the queen of heaven. She's not the mother of God. But then you ask them, is Jesus God? Yes. Is Mary Jesus's mother? Yes. So Mary's the mother of God. Shut up.
Right.
You know, that kind of thing. Um, you're not supposed to be praying to saints. They're dead. I'm like, no, because he's not the God of the dead. He's God of the living. You know,
Hmm.
thou shalt have, thou shalt have everlasting life. You know, you think if they're in heaven, they're just dead? No? Okay, cool. You
Right.
know,
The
it is, that's the main thing is you guys are worshiping Mary or, we worship the Pope. Like, no, no, we don't. Well, you think
it's
the Pope's infallible? Nope, we don't.
it's so interesting that you would encounter that level of objection rather than sort of what we I would think would be the more perhaps the more sophisticated Protestant objection, which is that the Catholic Church is, for example, wrong about justification or about authority, any of these core issues that are at the heart of the Reformation. And for Luther, the issue of Mary was not even really that significant an issue. So you would think that if Protestants are going to object to you, it would be around core issues of the Reformation instead of what are in a way more surface level issues. I,
Well, you
but
know what's
maybe most
crazy
people are
about the
surface level.
Reformation?
What's that?
I was gonna say that most Protestants don't even know what the Reformation was unless they heard about it online, someone arguing with a Catholic about it.
That's probably true.
But But like most people think you're talking about Dr. King when you mention Martin Luther.
Right. Are you? Are there
But
any?
I will say
Go ahead.
this: what people tend to forget about the Reformation was that in the Counter Reformation, the the Catholic Church wasn't just like, screw Martin Luther, he's a heretic. I mean, he was still a heretic, but they didn't just dismiss everything. He said, well, you know what? He got some of these things right, and some things were corrected with the Counter Reformation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but when he's like, you know what? These particular 7 books in my Bible don't jive with my lifestyle and my preferences, so we're going to remove them. The church is like, hold on. It's very similar to Henry VIII starting the Anglican Church simply because the Pope would not let him get a divorce so he could marry Anne Boleyn. He's like, well, screw you. I'll start my own church. All because you didn't believe that you couldn't get divorced. Okay, fine.
So tell us about what you are doing, because you have switched quite a bit of your online emphasis to talking about Catholicism. As a, I think
Mm-hmm.
18 months ago, you were mostly kind of talking about business related matters, and now a lot of it is about your faith. Tell us how does your conversion integrate with what you're doing online now and in the rest of your life?
Well, first and foremost, my job uh, as a Catholic is to create more Catholics.
Hmm.
And I can do that by one, keeping myself in check, to making sure that I'm not traveling down a path of, oh, this is not what the Catechism of the Church says. This is not what the church believes. This is not what you're supposed to be doing. By writing about it, in a way that explains it to people who might have questions, such as I had questions. And ever since I went to the church, like I said, life got better. I don't have to sell anything anymore. I had my own company. I sold that company. Um, Now I write full time, 100% for a living. I have a relationship with a publisher. And as soon as I finish a client, there's another one in my inbox and I start right away. I don't have to market myself. I don't have to sell. I don't have to do anything but sit down and write. I can spend time with my family. I can spend time, at church. I can spend time doing whatever I want. I'm so much, less stressed and worried about business than I was before. And I get to focus on the things that matter while still earning a great living for my family.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, one of those things that matter is my job as a Catholic is to create more Catholics.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can do that with my YouTube show, if I can do that with my blog, and if I can even work out, I mean, like most of the time, the things I would tweet were just advice to myself to remember, right? So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the articles that I write I'm learning about it and I'm getting, more versed in
Right.
the faith.
Mm-hmm.
And so writing about it makes it clear for me. And then maybe reading about it makes it clear for someone else.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm writing about something that I deeply care about. It's not something that doing this as a grind because I got to make money like the hustle monkeys on money Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm writing about something, my love for God and my love for Christ and the church. And it's extremely fulfilling.
Mm-hmm. Well, tell people where they can find all that and find you.
Well, on Twitter, I am at the Jeff Putnam, not the as in THEE, just THE. My website is CatholicConvertBlog.com. And on YouTube, we just aired the second episode today. And we do one episode every single day. Me and my co host, Ed, who is a cradle Catholic. And his kids are my age. So we come from two different generations, two different perspectives. It's a good show. It's unscripted. It's not a podcast. You can think of it like your drive time radio talk show where we just talk and make fun of each other and bring stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
That is at the Catholic Convert Show on YouTube. And the YouTube link is right there in my Twitter profile as well.
Well, thanks for talking, Jeff.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you having me on.